views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to Open 2.0. I'm your host, Alyssa Colon, and we've got a great show for you. Today's segment focuses on youth and activism and politics. Our guest is a 16-year-old mental health activist and community organizer, and is now an intern for Amanda Farías and former organizer for Alexandria, Ocasió, Cortez. Please welcome community organizer and activist Anais Aboab. Welcome to the show, and we're super excited to have you here and learn more about you, the work you do, and how we could get involved.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So I want to ask some questions. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the South Bronx.
In the South Bronx. So what school do you go to?
I go to Gramercy Arts High School.
Do you participate in any sports or anything?
Recently, no. But in my freshman year of high school, I did. I used to play 2 sports, but not this year, no.
So what grade are you in right now?
I'm in the 11th grade.
The 11th grade? How's that going right now? Is it hard? Is it difficult?
It's super stressful.
Yeah.
It's not an easy year, but I'm just, trying to get through the year as best as I can, so.
Yeah. And I want to ask you now about you being a mental health activist. So how did you become a mental health activist?
Well, initially, I actually joined this program called Thrive New York City. It's like a youth advisory board where they train young people on how to serve in their communities. Personally for me, I wanted to focus on mental health because it became very personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I started to work deeply within the South Bronx, especially on trying to get, resources for people who were sort of in the position that I was, because
Mm-hmm.
I also tend to struggle with, my mental health.
Yeah.
So getting into that field of work became very personal to me, and it made me want to help other people who were in my position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you feel like many teens suffer from mental health issues now more than ever?
I think yes. I think I've seen a drastic, increase in, mental, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I've certainly seen an increase within teens who do suffer from mental health. I think there are a lot of factors that play into it. I think it's either school,
Mm-hmm.
home life. So there are many factors that do essentially play a role, not only in our lives when it comes to mental health, but yeah.
I would like to also talk about your futures and goals for the Bronx community. So why did you want to focus your work in the Bronx?
Well, not only did I grow up in the Bronx, I just felt that for me, the plan for me was to never get into politics. I never saw myself actually doing work, in my community, but I just felt as if the Bronx was being ignored for way too long, and I just felt like nobody was fighting for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as a 16-year-old, yes, there's so little that I can do, but I felt as if I had to do something, right? Whether it was, volunteering on a political, campaign or doing something that would at least help one person. And if I could help that one person, then I can potentially help 10 other people, right? So that was like mainly the reason as to why I wanted to do more work in the Bronx, because again, it's not only where, I grew up, but it's also because people are just being ignored, and like I don't think that it's fair. So
wow, that's really great. Wow, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Open 2.0. We're back with some more Open 2.0, discussing youth and activism and politics with our amazing guest, Anais. So I want to also ask you, what are some hopes and goals you have for your work in the Bronx?
Some hopes and goals are essentially, well, first, since I am still a high school student, I want to be able to like get through that first, and then decide what I want to do then after. But in terms of hopes and goals, in terms of my work for the Bronx, I want to be able to like, I feel like aside from like the work that I'm doing, I actually want to be able to like have like an impact. I actually want my work to actually mean something. I don't want to claim that I've done all of this without having like an actual impact on like the people that actually live in my yeah. So it's essentially, I think it's a number of things, but I do just want to see something change. I think that's potentially like the goal, like on my end.
So I'm gonna ask you about politics. So at 16 years old, how did you score an internship, especially in the political world? Political world. So how did that happen?
So it wasn't more of like an internship. I was more so I actually approached AOC when she was first running. This was about back in May or so, and I approached her and I told her that I was, into politics. I wasn't really committed into working on any political, campaigns. So I didn't know what that meant, at the time. I just really wanted to like help her.
Yeah.
And so then once I, approached her, she actually made me one of her like volunteer / intern. And so since then, I've actually been working closely with other, progressive women that, are also running, for office. So that sort of like gave me like the exposure that I needed in order to like equip me to work on like other major political campaigns.
And I think it's fascinating how like you got into politics at the age of 15. How did that happen? Like what
So I actually started volunteering on like assembly, like, campaigns. That was like my initial like exposure. I wouldn't really consider it something that I like it's not something that I really like enjoy doing, because again, it's like, this was all, new to me. This is something that I wasn't really like exposed to. But once I started to work on AOC's, campaign, that was like the like initial exposure that I got into like working into politics and seeing what real grassroots campaign, organizing, looks like. So that was, I did start, working on, campaigns at 15, but it's not something that I fully learned until like the age of 16.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And for the last question, I would like to ask you, do you have advice for teens that want to study in politics?
Well, I know, for me personally, the political world can be very toxic, at times. It was, like, to me, like, being too, like, invested into the, political world, it can certainly be very, like, intense, but I think the benefit of it is that I'm, like, allowed to take up space in spaces where I tend to feel like I don't belong sometimes. But it's important, I think, for teens or for kids my age who do, want to get into this field of work to start small, right? You don't have to start working for these like major people, right? It doesn't have to be something like drastic, right? It can be, as simple as like helping your neighbors, or it doesn't have to be big. It can just be something that that is more convenient, for you, and it doesn't, or something that doesn't like require you to like put so much work into it. So yeah.
I'd like to also ask you, do you have advice for teens who want to build their resume?
Yes, so I actually have a resume. Like for me, like building mine was a bit tedious because I'm kind of like a go-getter. So I usually want to be like, in everything, just like, all at once.
Yeah.
But, going back to the, other question, I think it's just important to like start small, right? Building, your resume doesn't, like, you don't have to do like major things, right? It can, if you had a job at like, summer youth or something, that's something that like, you can put, on there, because it shows that not only are you committed to something that you like, that you either do like at school or, at home, but it's also something that shows that you're, committed to working somewhere else and like thriving, somewhere else. So,
unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's show. But stay tuned for a new season of Open 2.0, where we will be covering topics like activism, culture, fashion, arts, community, mental health, education, and everything from the youth by the youth. We'd like to thank our guest Anais for joining us and for you tuning in. Hope you enjoy the first show of this season and catch us back the next time for Open 2.0.